Okay, go ahead.
Okay,
Oh, watch.
we ready?
Yeah, I'm gonna take this off.
Ready for me to go?
Yeah, go ahead because I had it the wrong
direction here.
You'll actually get to see it.
Okay. So from my perspective, it's important to have women in politics because we offer a different perspective. And no matter what your race, gender, or ethnicity, when it's your personal experience, it gives you a different perspective. It's difficult for somebody who isn't of your race, your gender, or ethnicity to understand the experiences that you personally go through. So while you can empathize or sympathize, it's very difficult to know what you go through and to have the same perspective that we as women have, just as you have your perspectives from your race and ethnicity. I think when you look at what women have to deal with sometimes with pay, sometimes with having equal representation, I know that as a superintendent, I was recently at the Texas Association for School Administrators, and they were giving awards to the top superintendents in Texas. And I was sitting with some of my peers, and there were 10 superintendents who were recognized, and 9 out of the 10 were white males over 50. And there was one male who was just around 50, and he was Hispanic. So it was very obvious that outside of the Central Texas region, I think we do a good job in the Central Texas region, but outside of the Central Texas region, it was very obvious that white males still dominate education. And focusing from an educational perspective, there's so many different needs of our students now. And if you look around the room and you look at each other and you look at me, we look different than that typical white male over 50. And we need superintendents, we need politicians, we need teachers who understand what you're going through and how to relate to you. If we can't relate to our students and give our students the perspectives that they need and what you need to be successful in your education and careers, then we're missing it. And you're our future. You're going to be the ones who are our future. You're going to be taking care of us as we start to age. And you're going to be the leaders of the country and the city and the state. So it's important for us to make sure that we give you everything you need to be well equipped to lead us and to lead your city, nation, so forth. But that won't happen if we have a misrepresentation of our students. I think another piece to that is when you look at politics, women's issues, and I don't want to get into the specifics of women's issues, but women's issues are very real to women. And there are often males, a dominant male force that make up the laws surrounding women's issues. They don't understand those perspectives of women. They don't understand the rights of women. Men don't have the same challenges in those areas as women. So when they're making the laws and choices that majority white males make for our women, they're not understanding those unique experiences to you and to us. I don't know if there's any questions that you have specifically. I'd be happy. I'd really prefer if we could have more of an interactive session where you can ask questions and I could answer some of your specific questions.
In your experience as a administrator, what kind of discrimination is there against women as far as getting into the positions like you have?
There's a lot of women in the superintendency role do have a lot of difficulty getting into our roles. The profile for the superintendency, as I said, is generally a white male over 50. After that, a male in general is the next chosen choice. And then after that, a married woman. So if you're a woman who is not married or divorced, and if you're single, under 50 or at that age, the need for superintendents from many boards' perspectives is that they want a male who has that family experience, who is someone who looks like them. And it's very difficult for a woman that looks like me to break into that field because I'm not the typical superintendent. We're fortunate in Del Valle ISD, and I don't know how many of our students really know our Board of Trustees, but we have a very liberal Board of Trustees. And they're very much, their priority is social justice. Their priority is students. Their priority is preventing the student to prison pipeline. And their priority is providing opportunities for underrepresented groups For example, we just recently passed a bond, and many of you know about that, where we're going to get different technology and build buildings. And as we were picking and choosing architects, one of the priorities for them was that we had an architect firm who was made up of with diversity and with women in the leadership roles, which I can tell you when you start interviewing architects, that isn't the typical profile. So we are very lucky to have a board of trustees who looks for that diversity because they want the administrators to look like the student population and to have a different variety of experiences. So in any other school district, I would say that it would be more difficult for a woman that looked like me and had my divorce history. Probably it would be difficult to be a superintendent, but fortunately with our board of trustees, they embrace that and they look for that diversity.
Where do you foresee Del Valle's position in education in the next 10 years?
At Del Valle is, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, what's the future of Del Valle in 10 years?
Oh, the future Del Valle in 10 years. Future Del Valle in 10 years is going to be one that offers a lot of opportunities for our students to get into the workforce at a younger age, where we have genuine internships. And what I mean by internships are, we want to, and I'm actually partnering right now with businesses to build curriculum that ties with what the business leaders are looking for at Google, at IBM, at Facebook, so that if you start an internship in high school, that you will be able to move directly into a role of employment with them supplementing your college education. So we're going to be a district that focuses on real world application and real world opportunities for our students. I hope to be a biliterate district. We're beginning dual language in pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, and first grade. Dual language is when half the day is taught in English, half the day is taught in Spanish. We have done that for the past 3 years for our English language learners in the primary grades. And just this past year, we began in pre-kindergarten, half the class is English speaking and half the class is Spanish speaking. And half the day is taught in English, half the day is taught in Spanish. We're scaling that up next year to kindergarten and first grade at every campus. So in 10 years, we hope that those students are in high school and we're continuing dual language in middle school and high school for 2 reasons. One, we know that students who have experiences learning in 2 language, they create more neural pathways and outperform their same age peers. When we actually looked at our data of our kiddos that are in pre-K, they are outperforming their same age peers. It gives you a better opportunity for jobs. And then once we begin to teach students at an early age how to acquire 2 languages at the same time, it's much easier to acquire a 3rd language. So I really want to embrace that biliteracy type of education as well as multicultural, where we bring in other languages. A lot of other campuses and districts bring in Mandarin Chinese. That's a language that is becoming part of our global economy, and it isn't something that we offer. So I really would like to look at what your needs are for a global economy and make sure that we offer those. We also offer more opportunities for interesting coding experiences. Coding could be very dry, but it's a need in Central Texas. And when you meet with the Chamber of Commerce in Austin, they'll tell you that one of the areas where we're really lacking is hiring people who have engineering and coding degrees. But at the same time, it's difficult to get students interested in that. However, if we partner with business leaders and create a curriculum that aligns very tightly with the business leaders program, then that will help get more students interested, give you real opportunities, and even entrepreneurships, something that I'm beginning to have conversations about and wanted to introduce to my student advisory team, and any of you are welcome to be part of that, is that the courses in the CTE building and our career and technical education tracks, we want to make sure that, again, they're robust and that they're geared towards a future for you. So a group that I'm working with has recommended that I have some of you apply to write that curriculum, and you would actually get paid, and you would have an internship and an entrepreneurship that you could start here in your junior and senior year. So in 10 years, that's the future of Del Valle ISD, starting in pre-K and all the way up through high school, really having global students with a focus on multiculturalism.
Any student questions?
Yes, yes.
Going back to being a woman power, so to say, what is something us as students can do to get to that? Or being changing the world in a way that there are more women in power?
I think you have to be willing to take risks, and you have to be comfortable where you have confidence, because you're going to have a lot of pushback. And a lot of times I have a lot of ideas that aren't necessarily popular. So I have to be confident and know that I'm centered in my decision making, and that my decision making isn't going to be swayed when there is pushback, whether because I'm a woman or whether because my ideas may be more out of the box. I think sometimes what happens is when there's pressure to quiet a woman down, or anyone for that matter, the pressure is that you begin to quiet down and begin to back down. And what you have to be able to do is center on your core beliefs and push through that. My core belief is always do what's best for kids. That's not always popular, believe it or not, because sometimes what's best for kids isn't easy for adults. And when it isn't easy for adults, there's sometimes pushback. And as a female leader, I have to be able to have that confidence to go up against many of my peers and many people who don't want to be inconvenienced. So as a woman, I need to be centered in my core beliefs and not be easily swayed, and be able to be assertive while not being aggressive. One of the challenges that many women face, and sometimes I do, is I'm direct and I'm assertive. Direct, and I will tell you exactly what I'm thinking. I'll say it politely, but I will be very direct and very straightforward. And I will be very assertive. I am not going to easily be swayed if I'm centered on my core belief. Sometimes what you'll see, and sometimes what you'll hear women leaders say, is if a man does that, he is a leader and he is taking over and he's taking charge. When a woman does that, she's difficult or she's argumentative. So I have witnessed that myself. I try to make sure that I build relationships first, so that when I do have to have those conversations, that it isn't seen as being too aggressive. But I have witnessed where something could be said by a gentleman, whereas when it's said by a woman, the perspective is from a man who's being very powerful to a woman who's being aggressive and argumentative. So that is a challenge. My advice would be, don't compromise your values and stay true to yourself, and don't waver.
Adrian had a question from South Africa, and he was wondering, and I think you addressed a little bit of it there, about assertiveness. And how would you say, how did you get your leadership style from, or who was your mentors or the people you looked for to copy after?
Interestingly, I'm asked that a lot, and I've had a great deal of good leaders to model after. But the first leader that I have modeled myself after was my first superintendent. I first started teaching in Pennsylvania at a school district actually called Valle, Independent School District. And I had a woman superintendent. Her name was Dr. Candace Finan. And she was a very classy woman. She was a very direct and assertive woman, and she focused on students first. She was also very well educated, and she didn't implement a program that she didn't have thorough knowledge of. And she made sure that anytime she researched anything, she researched it deeply before implementing anything into a school system. She was a firm believer of putting herself in front of students and getting to know them personally. She was a firm believer in providing professional development to teachers and getting involved in classroom walkthroughs and getting to know everybody on a personal level. She wasn't always popular because she often made teachers do things that were more difficult on teachers than they were on students in every classroom, from kindergarten all the way up through high school. This was back in the early 90s. They had 8 computers, and teachers were expected to teach through center-based education. So that wasn't always popular. And I say that because she was assertive and she was direct, and she would always give this response: I will not compromise my values in order to not meet students' needs. And she would say, I will do what's best for kids regardless of personal risk. And that was where I've modeled my leadership from. And I feel very strong that if you center yourselves on your core beliefs and your assertiveness is for the right reasons and you're confident in that, then that explaining the why helps ease that assertiveness, or that view as assertiveness. You have to explain why you're doing something and build the relationships.
Adrian had another question, if you could, Bill. He said many girls in South Africa do not have strong leadership dispositions because they don't have the ability to have chances for leadership. How important is chance for leadership involved to get the kids involved?
It is important to have a chance for leadership, but it's also important to be able to put your voice out there. There were many times when I was in situations where I was in the background and I just made sure that my voice was heard. What I did though to make sure that my voice was heard is I armed myself with facts. And I made sure that when I was coming forward with an idea that might not be popular, or even just to put myself in a leadership position, that I was armed with facts. And when I go into a debate or when I go into a challenging situation, I will make sure that I know everything that I possibly can on the topic, and I will make sure that I know everything that I possibly can about the situation, so that if I am getting pushback, I'm able to reply with facts rather than opinion, and I'm able to reply with facts rather than emotion. So in that way, that's how I was able to get my voice heard. And for girls in Africa who don't have those leadership opportunities, I would say that it's important for them to get the most thorough education they possibly can, be very strong in literacy, make sure that they research and that they're armed with facts. Because when you're armed with facts, people can't argue. They can argue their opinion, but when you have the facts to back you, you become credible, whether you're a man or a woman.
Dr. Biller, I see that Judge Eckhart's here. So, Judge Eckhart, would you like to come here and address? We have a pretty august bunch of people here. Come have a seat.
We're going to pass the baton, Judge.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You stand up here. The gentleman you're actually seeing is Adrian Myers, and he's in South Africa.
Hello, Mr. Myers.
And he's working with Mr. Ramirez here, who's from the World Affairs Council in Austin. And we're putting together a curriculum unit on racism. And we're starting off with women, leadership, and gender, and that's what we want you about women in politics and power. So if you could address us a little bit about that, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. We just recently got our Travis County snapshot, where we take all of our American Communities survey data, and we crunch that data against some other data points that we have to look at our Travis County impact. And one thing with regard to women in Travis County, and this was, unfortunately, I don't see this statistic having moved a whole lot in the last few years, is that women, even in Travis County, still make about 23% less than men for the same jobs. So we're still seeing some pretty significant bias against women with a statistic like that women in aggregate make 23% less than men, even in Travis County. So we've got a lot of work to do. It's specifically to women leaders, we actually do pretty well with regard to women leaders. The majority of the City of Austin City Council is women. A majority of the Travis County Commissioners Court is women. A majority of the bench, which is the judges, the district court judges and the county court at law judges, I believe now are majority women as well. We also have in our judiciary, all the judges, we have a judiciary that really reflects the complexion of the county. So we have Black judges, we have Latinx judges, we have Asian judges, men and women judges. So good news there is that our judiciary definitely does reflect our community. But we still are struggling, generally speaking, in the county with regard to gender parity in pay. And we also really, really struggle in the criminal justice system. We are still seeing significant disparity in the racial demography of the people who actually get prosecuted and put in jail. We have done some work there. We did an independent study. How many of y'all are in statistics? A couple of y'all. A lot more of y'all need to get into statistics. Super important. But we did a statistical analysis with a third party to take a look at our criminal justice practices from the point of booking through to the end of prosecution to see where our gender discrimination, our racial discrimination was coming into play. Good news and bad news there. Good news was the statisticians could find no statistically significant racial discrimination in our practices and our outcomes from the point of booking to final sentencing. Bad news is that they found significant impact with regard to racial discrimination based on whether an individual had court-appointed counsel or whether they could hire counsel. So what that means is if a defendant is poor and has to have court-appointed counsel, they're more likely to have a bad outcome with regard to conviction and numbers of days in jail. So, like I said, good news, bad news. No racial discrimination from the point of booking forward, but definitely some economic discrimination. We suspect that the racial discrimination in our criminal justice system is occurring before booking, meaning at the point of arrest. So we still have some big issues in racial discrimination in police practices. So that's a little overview with regard to discrimination, both gender and race discrimination as it relates to Travis County. What else do y'all want to hear about?
What got you interested in politics?
What got me interested in politics is what I was just talking about. I really like statistics. I'm not that good at it, but I like it and I understand it. I'm a great appreciator of it. It's like, you know, how many of y'all love music? Everybody loves music, right? How many of y'all actually play an instrument? So see, you can love something and not be that good at practicing it. So I love statistics. Not that great at doing it myself. But I really think that government exists to level the playing field of opportunity for everyone. And statistics are super valuable at determining whether you've achieved that result, whether you actually have leveled up the playing field. And so I got into politics because I like looking at that kind of stuff. I want to know when it's not working, and I really enjoy finding ways to make it work. I really enjoy finding the truth and facing it head on and looking for a solution instead of dancing around, making excuses, or just not looking. Mythology plays a big part in politics. We get super involved in our political myths. You see that a lot in partisan politics these days. People get really invested in their mythology. I'm not that interested in party politics and mythology. I want to know what's working and what isn't, and if it's not working, how to fix it. So that's what got me into politics.
What advice could you have for our young people here for them to get into politics?
How many of y'all want to be public servants? Come on. Okay. Oh, I got a couple, 3 over here. All right. Public service is an awesome career, a really awesome career. When I was y'all's age, I wanted to be a movie star. And that would have been super fun. And I even pursued it. I have an undergraduate in theater, and I lived in New York for 12 years, and I was part of a theater company. It was really, really great. But there was a point in my life where I thought, what is my purpose? And how can I make a difference for people? And there's a point in your life where you start thinking about what is your purpose and how can you really have a resonant effect on the people around you? And at that moment, I realized I really wanted to be a public servant and that it felt like a calling. It felt like something I could do my entire life and then feel really good at night when I went home and went to bed, feeling like I had done something that was important and relevant. And then at the end of my life, I could look back and say, I really served. I mattered to a lot of people. And not in an ego way, not in an ego movie star way. I really mattered, not just as a symbol, not just as like a momentary opinion maker on Instagram. Although that's really important too. Social media has become super important about influencing opinion, and that can be used for good. So I would really encourage those of y'all who are really thinking about a purpose-driven life, really do consider public service. It's an awesome career. And there are many, many different ways to serve.
Do you think Austin's diversity will rub off on neighboring cities when it comes to like people in power? We're very diverse with women and color. Do you think it will rub off on like San Antonio or other neighboring cities?
Actually, this is where statistics are important. Go look at the demography. Have any of y'all ever looked at the American Community Survey website? It's a great website. American Community Survey, ACS. Go look at the demography of San Antonio and Pflugerville and compare it against the demography of the city of Austin. You will find, actually, that Pflugerville and San Antonio are more diverse than the city of Austin. So actually, I'm hoping that Pflugerville and San Antonio rubs off on Austin. And also look at the demography of the unincorporated areas of Travis County, like Del Valle. Actually, it is far more diverse here in Del Valle than it is inside the city limits of Austin. So we have some work to do inside the city of Austin, actually. There are 22 different municipalities and villages in Travis County. And a lot of people don't know that. City of Austin is the largest by far with about 800, 900,000 people. But there are 21 other municipalities and villages inside Travis County. Manor is, one, Weberville, Pflugerville, Lakeway, Mustang Ridge, Creedmoor. There's a lot of interesting communities and a lot of diverse cultural things happening. Del Valle has Pflugerville has a huge African diaspora. People from continental African countries, really thriving community up there. Lots of folks from the Near East, Pakistan, Iran, India. It's a really thriving community there too. So we're seeing some very interesting things happening. The third most spoken language at home. Do y'all know what the third most spoken language at home is in Travis County? Vietnamese. Yeah. So diversity is happening. It's awesome to see. It's enriching us. It's a good question. Any other questions, y'all? Come on, I know you got questions. Yes, ma'am.
You said there was, in Travis County, you said there was 23%, that women made 23% less than men. How would you suggest that? How can we change that?
It's an interesting statistic because there's been a lot of research as to why women make less. And there are some interesting cultural aspects to that. Some of it is a gender bias, absolutely. Some of it is from the probability that the higher probability that a woman will stay home with her children for some period of time during her work life, whereas a man is less probable to stay home with children during some period of his productive work life. So that has an aspect to it. And then there's also a third sort of altruistic aspect, that when a woman is in a position, she is less likely to ask for a raise than a man. She's more likely to wait to be offered a raise. So what I would suggest is that men and women, young men and women, when you're in your work life, don't feel shy about asking for a raise. That's what you can do personally, is don't be shy about asking for a raise. The worst that could happen is you wouldn't get it. So don't be shy. The second thing you can do personally is when you're taking a job, research how much people usually make in that job. Do the research. Do not wait for somebody to offer. Actually, there's lots of websites available to take a look and see what people usually make. And don't be afraid to ask for it. the worst that could happen is they'd say no. Ask. And then the third thing I would suggest from a personal standpoint, male or female, don't be afraid to look after your family, whether it's your children or whether it's your parents. There are good laws in the United States that require employers to give you time off to look after your children and your relatives. Embrace that, and also make sure you know your rights with regard to staying in the workforce, or at least tied to a job while you're out of the workforce, because that really sets you back career-wise when you totally step out of the workforce to care for your children or your aging relatives. So really know your rights there and really assert them. Those would be the three things I would suggest that will probably move the needle over time about that discrepancy in pay. Got some more questions? Because I could talk all day about women in leadership too. Women in leadership is an interesting thing. Y'all want to hear how I got this job? Do y'all even know what my job is? I bet you don't. I'm the county judge. Now you hear judge, 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 and there's a whole bunch of judges in Travis County, but there's only one county judge. The county judge is actually the chief administrator of the county, the chief executive. So I set budget and policy along with the commissioner's court of 4 people. So you may have heard of Commissioner Gomez, who represents out here, Commissioner Trevelyan, who represents to the north of here, Commissioner Daugherty, who represents western Travis County, and Commissioner Shea, who represents sort of central Travis County and over to the west. So as the chief executive, I am over 1,000 square miles, which is Travis County. Half of those miles are outside of a municipality. If we were our own state by population, we would be larger than 8 of the states in the United States. So think about that. Travis County by population is larger than 8 states in the United States. We are a thriving community. Folks here, the average person in Travis County makes more money than a person in Texas or the United States, is better educated than a person in Texas or the United States, has better health outcomes than a person in Texas or the United States. We are doing very, very well. Demand that the opportunity in Travis County is fairly distributed to all 1.3 million residents of Travis County. You demand that. It is your county. Government is us. Government exists to level up that playing field and make sure that opportunity is fairly distributed. So you, as citizens of Travis County, you belong here, you demand that opportunity get fairly distributed. And it is awesome to see this school demanding that. Your Del Valle Independent School District does a great job of advocating and demanding that opportunity is equally spread throughout the county. So you can be very, very proud of that. Yes,
So how did you get your position?
I was, like I said, I was in a theater company in New York. Isn't that hilarious? You can look at my IMDb.
2 movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in a theater company in New York, but my father and my mother had both been in politics. And so when I reached 30, I realized I really wanted to be a public servant. So I went back to school. It's weird going back to school when you're 30. But I recommend it. I mean, if y'all want to take a gap year or gap years, I think that is really cool. It's clarifying. I really had a great time in my 20s. But then I went back to school, got a law degree and a master's in public affairs. I became a prosecutor for a while, prosecuting DWIs and family violence cases and some environmental prosecutions. And then I decided I didn't like doing policy work case by case by case. I wanted to do policy work that had a broader application. So I ran for the commissioner's court and won. And then after about 6 years on the commissioner's court, the judge, Judge Sam Bisco, y'all may have heard of him, he decided to retire, and I announced that I was going to run. It was a difficult race. hotly contested. I ran against a friend who's a really nice guy who was the head of the party. And it was hard, but that question about 23% less than men, it was assumed he would win because he's a guy. It was assumed that he was going to win. He had gotten all of the endorsements and had raised a lot of money before I announced that I was running. And then I decided to go for it. And so I announced that I was running. And even though it was super, super scary, I stood up at podiums like this and said, I really like Andy, and Andy is a friend, but I am better qualified for this job. I know what the county does, and I know what it can do, and I know how to get us there. And I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm saying this because I believe it. I believe that Andy is not as well prepared for this job as I am. And as a woman candidate, a lot of people said that I was arrogant, and they used the B word, and a lot of other things. But I think it was true, and I think the proof is that the electorate chose me, and then they chose me again. And I'm really grateful for that. But even if it feels mean, sometimes you got to stand up for yourself and just say what you think is actually happening. And it's not mean to stand up for yourself. Yes, sir.
What gave you the courage? Like, what gave you the courage to do that? And then what motivated you to like be so confident in yourself and to continue to go even against a friend and all the different things on the sidelines that were coming at you? Like, what kept you going?
That's a really good question. I think part of it is that my parents have always been hugely encouraging to me, and they expected this of me, and that made a massive difference. But also there have been a lot of other people along the way, and this you raise a really good point. So let me throw this out at y'all. Really think about who you gather around you. Really be intentional about deciding where the people you know fit in your life. So I think about it as concentric circles. You've got a circle that's up close to you, that's like your soul circle. The people who will support you shining your light, no matter what that is. The people who will have your back, who are going to tell you the truth. And those are the rare people. Be super intentional about who those people are. Cultivate them, thank them. Now, not everybody you want to be in that soul circle are really good candidates for that soul circle. So also be real clear that you may have like a teacher who you really admire and you really want them to be in that soul circle, but actually they're not focusing on you sufficiently. Put them in the circle just outside of that, which is admirable, good contact, maybe we'll write you a letter of recommendation someday, but they're not actually your soul circle. And then the circle further out from that, friends, acquaintances, people who, might engage in some idle chatter, maybe won't have your back every time, but love them too. They're good people also. They just don't belong in those inner circles. Just be super intentional about that and really cultivate that soul circle. And know when people are in it and when they're not. And when they're not, that's okay too. You're going to know tons of people in your life. Some of them are going to be mere acquaintances, and that's okay too. Because those mere acquaintances may start walking their way into those inner circles. Similarly, some people who are in your inner circle may start walking their way out. Be intentional about that too. Those are the people that are going to give you the courage to stand up and say what needs to be said. And also then when those people who you thought were your friends start slagging you, you'll be like, oh, I get it. You're on an outer ring, and that's okay. All right.
I think it's the time that we might have to leave at this point. The kids are about ready to go to another class. But we do really appreciate you coming today and the words of wisdom. Can we have a couple of pictures of y'all together?
That'd be great, sure.
And also my apologies for being late. I'm a terrible time manager and I need to learn to be much better about that. So my sincere apologies. I've tried to pack too much in.
I know.
I don't know.
Can Babe join you?
Sure,
That'd be great.
Lauren, you're good at this.
You are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank you
coming.
being here. Really appreciate it. You know, it's interesting.
We should get in there and find out if they're women in leadership. Just y'all three. Well, then why don't I go?
Oh, I forgot. Was Carla, you want to come up here to take a picture with us?
Women in leadership, yes.
Yeah. Is Candace there too?
Okay. Yes, you're so smart.
Well, this is a trick question. You're supposed to have your badge on at all times.
Women in leadership.
Awesome. Oh, very nice.
Yeah, put that in the background.
You all keep up the good work.
No, lost it.
Adrian, hold on a second. We're going to talk with you.
I'll get you lined up over at it. And once you can breathe, I'm going to take about 5 more and get them to close their eyes. And last one, thank you.
Thank you.
I know.
Close my eyes, okay. Well, then hopefully you guys have well rested and completed eyes.
Yeah.
You should have been in there too.
Thank you. Yay.
Yeah, very nice.
Thank you, guys.
Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. I love coming here. Anytime, Mr. Cunningham, they really thank you very
thank you so
much
much.
for letting us come in. And
Oh, yeah.
That's what she did say. So.
And then like, well, she's brother by the son, how
Okay. Okay, okay. Okay, so I'll come down, I'll take a picture, but then I have to go. Okay.
If there's an office, I feel.
Got the guy in South Africa talking discrimination with gender too. We couldn't get the people. Go ahead. Kids,
I wrote a paper that was published on gender equality.
Oh, wow.
Yes, but you know, hearing her speak
Oh, yeah.
was my lit review, like all